We're back, baby. Season 2 of the Phil Steele Show. The man, the myth, the legend himself, the unicorn, the author of college football's most comprehensive magazine for nearly 30 years. Phil Steele is with us again at Phil Steele 042. The Lock Doctor is in the house. Tripp Hurd. Follow him on Twitter or X. Not sure what we're really calling it now, but at Tripp Hurd. I'm at Kyle Schassburger here with you. And Phil, another long summer, just counting down the days to kick off. Week 0 is here, a light slate. You got only 7 FBS games, but week 1 right around the corner. I know this is something we've all been jonesing for some time. This is where the fruits of your labor are shown, all the magazine work. If you don't have it in your hand already, you're doing it wrong. Go to philsteele.com to find out more. Phil, how you been? Sir, it's so good to see your face.
Yeah, good to see you guys again. That's for sure. And I've been doing great. I love the summer. It's I could kick back, work maybe 50, 60 hours a week. It's sort of like being on vacation. But working on college football 365 days of the year like I do, it's the only sport I follow. It's always a lot more fun when the games are being played. So pumped up for Saturday.
Little peek behind the curtain. So we're recording through video, a video podcast on demand afterwards, where we'll produce some clips, some nuggets for you on social media through all Phil Steele's social channels. For all the audio OGs, that is still the bread and butter. You'll find us, as always, each and every week on Thursdays at College Sports Now. So wherever you podcast, you will find this. There'll be some opportunities for listeners, the interaction, to get in on a $99 value. That's right, your own membership to Phil Steele Plus. So more on that each week and how you can obtain your free membership. That's a $99 value. It's simple. Go head-to-head with Phil, leave a review, add some picks, your power plays. Phil will give his power plays each and every week. Limited slate again this week. However, plenty of content, plenty of handicapping, leans, and breakdowns here between now and the end of the year. But we're just getting started. And Tripp, it might be a seminal season for you. Not just a seminal moment, but I know you're excited for FSU to get back at it. Jordan Travis, one of the Heisman favorites. You got to wait another week, though, buddy, when LSU comes to Florida.
Yeah, we do have to. I know last year they had the tune-up game in week 0. They don't get that this year, so a little nervous rolling into next weekend. Huge game, top 10 matchup. I can't wait to talk to Phil. And, I mean, God bless you, Phil. Only 50, 60 hours a week. I'm not awake that many hours a week, so but good for you. But, yeah, excited about the Noles. Can't wait to see what Phil thinks about them this year. And, you know, it's going to be a lot of people have them top 2 in the ACC. I think the ACC might be more like a 3-team race this year. I think Pitt, a lot of people are sleeping on them. But, yeah, excited to get into it and glad to be back here with you guys again.
And we've got 5 teams, I think, in action from Conference USA here for Week 0. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into one of the headliners right off the bat for Week 0, one of 7 FBS games. Let's talk some football, Phil. I'm not going to ping pong you questions about realignment or any of the other, BS that has been out there and certainly oversaturated the college sports football talking space here over the last couple of months. So 13th ranked Notre Dame, a 20.5-point favorite. 48.5 is the over-under total against Navy. This game's being played in Dublin. They met previously back there in 2012. 2:30 p.m. Eastern start on NBC. 96 meeting all time. Phil, Irish have won 10 of the last 11. Got out to a huge start. Blew a 35-point lead with these two men a year ago. What do you think of Navy's chances under a new head coach? He had been on the staff before, former DC Brian Newberry, and the midshipmen able to keep this one inside the number Saturday.
Yeah, well, first of all, let's start with Navy. And, Brian Newberry, when I talked to him this year, I talked to 123 of the 133 head coaches. Very impressed with Coach Newberry. A little bit bittersweet. I always enjoy talking to Coach Niumatalolo. But the one thing Newberry's done different this year is they've hit in spring and they've hit in August. So I think they're going to open up the season better. If you look in the magazine, the last 3 openers, they've got blown out each of the 3 years. I think they'll be more productive in that respect. However, when you look at Notre Dame, they are my new number 1A surprise team. I expected them to be a preseason top 10 AP pick this year. So I didn't put them on my surprise team list because of that fact. And we've hit 95% of the top preseason top 10s, which I pick in February in advance of August, 6 months in advance. But Notre Dame was the one team that didn't make it this year. So now they are my surprise team. I love what Marcus Freeman's got on defense. They've got 8 starters back. Offensively, they go from having a backup quarterback to one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Sam Hartman. Special teams is solid. Offensive line's one of my top units. And when you look at the Irish, I think when they get USC and Ohio State at home, this team has a shot at actually qualifying for the playoffs. So like the Irish a lot. I think Navy's improved. I think the number's reasonable at 20 and a half, 21. That's about where I would put it. Anytime teams go overseas, you wonder about what's going to happen a couple days prior. Teams are out of their normal environment. However, it's going to be a little rainy, a little windy for this one. I actually lean under in this one. I like the Irish to win by about 3 touchdowns, but I would go with under as my pick in this game.
Season 2 for Marcus Freeman led the Irish to a 9-4 record, struggled out of the gates early with losses against Marshall at home and Stanford. Were able to turn on late, Gator Bowl win against South Carolina. It was 35-13, that lead against Navy a year ago. They blew that, were able to hang on for a 3-point win. And then for Navy, 4-8, 17 returning starters. Super excited, though, about Sam Hartman as a Notre Dame Golden Domer himself. That's right, the guy wearing the Georgia polo here today. On the podcast, Sam Hartman, 27-18 in 45 starts at Wake Forest, most 300-plus yard ACC passing games, 110 total TDs, certainly an upgrade at the quarterback level, maybe their best since the Brady Quinn days in South Bend. Tripp?
All right, second game of the day, UTEP on the road at Jacksonville State, 5:30 kick time there. The Miners are favored by a point here, the total at 54. We all know you don't just stroll into Burgess Snow Field and get an automatic dub, right? Or maybe you do. I don't know. UTEP, you've got them, I think in your magazine, you had them second in the conference. Jacksonville State coming in at 9th. Gavin Hardison's back for the Miners. What do you like here, Phil? You think the UTEP can cover?
Yeah, I do. The thing I like about UTEP this year is the line of scrimmage. They're strong on both the offensive line and the defensive line. They also have that veteran quarterback, as you touched on, Tripp, and Gavin Hardison. I think UTEP's way underrated at this point in the year. Now, with Jacksonville State, they were an outstanding 9-2 last year. And we saw last year that an FCS team can make the jump. Look at what James Madison did. They basically won their division in the Sun Belt Conference, even though the NCAA didn't acknowledge it. They did. And Jacksonville State was 9-2 last year. I actually talked to Rich Rod last year prior to the season and talked to him, of course, again this year. And I do like the overall talent they have. They bring back their quarterback in Zion Webb. But I think there is a difference in talent here. And I think it's going to show this season in the jump up. This is not James Madison making a move. It's Jacksonville State. So I think UTEP's going to be capable of going on the road. Gavin Hardison's had plenty of big road games in his career. I like UTEP to go on the road and get the victory here. And the price is cheap at -1.
Yeah, the Miners among your most improved teams, as you indicated, Phil. The Zion Webb at quarterback. Again, a big shocker that he was able to come back. One of 15 returning starters. Jacksonville State 9-2 a year ago. Year 2 for Rich Rod. UTEP coming off that 5-7 year. 11 straight home opening wins for Jacksonville State as they make their FBS debut, and it's in Conference USA Showdown, 5:30 on CBS Sports Network. Let's go to Las Cruces, New Mexico State. Big surprise a year ago, Phil, under the direction of Jerry Kill, which maybe makes it not as much of a surprise. I know they were one of my favorites. I was beating down the door for Jerry Kill throughout a lot of the year, one of those constant, consistent sicko picks. But everywhere he's been as an Illinois guy, Chicago guy, very familiar from his time at Southern Illinois to NIU, what he did at Minnesota. Health has always been a factor or a concern for him, and being able to maintain his productivity as a head coach in college football. But he's got another go at it here in New Mexico State. Actually favored 6.5 points at home, 45 the over-under, taking in UMass. Big cross-country flight for the Minutemen, who have been kind of in the cellar of college football for over a decade, if not longer. This is a 7 o'clock game, UMass and New Mexico State. Phil, what do you think about this matchup here, week 0?
Yeah, as long as the number's under 7, like it is, I definitely like New Mexico State here. They got the benefit of some rare bowl practices last year. And if you followed New Mexico State like you did, Kyle, you know that they really got going at the end of the year. At the start of the year, Pavia and Frakes were splitting the quarterback job, and neither was really effective. But Pavia really came on down the stretch, threw for those 300 yards against Valpo. Had the big game against Bowling Green as well. Big game against Liberty, leading the road upset there. And I think New Mexico State's just going to continue that upward ascent led by Pavia. In fact, a couple of the opposing head coaches I talked to brought up Pavia and talked about what a good leader he is. And I think you're going to see a much improved QB and a much improved New Mexico State offense. Now, with UMass, talking to Coach Don Brown, he's thinking they can have a shot at getting to a bowl game this year. That's his goal. And they are in much better shape. He took over a team that was lightly experienced last year much more experience, both sides of the ball this season. I think UMass will be more competitive, but they have dropped 24 straight road games. They are playing in altitude. They are making a long trip. And while I'm going to pick some spots this year, and you might pick some spots as well, Kyle, for DU's UMass this year, because I think they are going to spring an upset or two. I like New Mexico State minus the 6.5 in this one.
Yeah, New Mexico State started 0-4, finished 7-2 last season. And, maybe you've already answered my question here. I thought I had a sneaky little play of UMass over 16.5 as their team total, but I'm sensing maybe you don't like that so much, Phil.
Plus 16.5, you're saying?
No, their team total was 16.5 for the game.
16.5. I could see the possibility there. I mean, New Mexico State's only laying 6.5. I think Pavia and company are going to put some points on the board. I don't mind that one at all.
Okay, good deal. Well, let's jump to the next game. We've got Ohio heading west to take on San Diego State. The Aztecs -2, totals 49 on the game. The line opened at 3.5. It's moved down, so somebody apparently likes Ohio. What do you think of the Bobcats' chances at Snapdragon Stadium on Saturday?
Yeah, it's interesting. 2 years ago, I wondered why UAB lost a couple of home games. And I was talking to Bill Clark about it, Coach Clark about it. And he said, well, you know what? We never even practiced in our home stadium, our new home stadium prior to the year. They had a brand new home stadium. And he felt that the team struggled a little bit. And I think we saw that out of San Diego State last year. They didn't have a lot of work in Snapdragon Stadium. They lost the opening game to Arizona. They barely got past Toledo. They barely got past Hawaii. They had struggles at home, but I think they'll be more adept at home this year. And really with them, the big difference was Jalen Madden taking over at quarterback. I mean, the first 4 games of the season, they were sort of inept offensively. Yeah, they put up 38 points on Idaho State, but other than that, they struggled. Once Jalen Madden took over, the offense was much better last year. With Ohio, it's a different topic. It's the defense. Last year, the first 6 games, they gave up like 550 yards per game. I'm rounding off here. And in the last 7 games, their defense was vastly improved, getting up about 350 yards per game, a 200-yard per game improvement. I think we'll continue to see the improvement defensively here. And you don't have to bet every game on the board. So this is one of those games that I consider a pure toss-up. The line's accurate as long as you're not getting over 3.5 with one team. If the spread goes over 3.5 and lines do move this week 1, I would like the dog in it. But if the spread's under 3 points like it is right now, I'm pretty much just going to sit back, watch this game. Two outstanding teams play a very competitive game and see who wins it and learn a little bit about both teams.
Okay.
Aztecs trying to get back to Mountain West prominence. 7-6 year ago, they were 5-2 at Snapdragon Stadium, all said and done. But they get Boise State and Fresno at home this year, so that certainly can aid their league efforts as they try to get back into that conference title game. Ohio with quarterback Curtis Rourke back, the MAC Offensive Player of the Year a year ago, had his season cut short though because of an ACL injury. So should be a fun one. Rematch to the 2018 Frisco Bowl, 7 o'clock on FS1. Hawaii and Vanderbilt, Phil, an encore presentation of what we got a year ago, except now we go from the islands to Music City, where the Vanderbilt Stadium and the Vanderbilt folks have gotten a lot of flack here recently. Like, stadiums have never been under construction before when games are being played, but it's kind of been blown out of proportion because people love to gang up on little old Vanderbilt in the SEC. There might be 28,000 people who will fit in that thing to see the Rainbow Warriors and the Commodores on Saturday night, 7:30 on the SEC Network. 17.5, the doors are favored by 55.5 is the total. These two teams a year ago, it was not competitive. However, it was the first game for Timmy Chang, who didn't have much time, and I've heard you say before, you didn't even get to talk with Timmy Chang a year ago. So he was trying to learn his team, and it was an embarrassing 63-10 game. I imagine this one's going to be a lot more tight this year at Vanderbilt, who is 5-7. 3.5 over win total. They were able to shatter thanks to some key upsets late in the year over Kentucky and Florida. I don't know if the Commodores are going to be able to take another step forward. What says you, Phil, is Hawaii is trying to improve upon a 3-10 season. Their last win against the SEC team came in 2003.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the head, Kyle. Last year, I talked to Coach Chang this year, and I thought, is he trying to avoid me or what? And he said, Phil, be honest with you, just didn't know the team good enough to talk to you last year. And he knows the team good enough this year. And, when you look at the Hawaii last year, they were struggling offensively, especially in the first 6 games. Then Timmy Chang incorporated more of the run and shoot, which was, of course, his big time success when he was the quarterback at Hawaii. And Braden Shager took to it like a duck to water. They were much more effective throwing the football down the stretch. They were a team that was an outstanding spread darling. They are in much better shape this year. They've got loaded experience, both sides of the football. They're not trying to learn the team like last year. Timmy Chang's a second-year head coach. So I'm bullish on Hawaii's chances this year, especially when they're getting a big spread like this. Now, with Vanderbilt, they're a team that thrives on being the underdog, as you know, and they're a dangerous underdog team. This home edge, I think, will be actually pretty good for them because generally when they play at home in the SEC, the opponent outnumbers them. But here, they'll outnumber the opponent. While the stadium is closer together, maybe all 28,000 people will be sitting together as opposed to spread out in the stadium. So I think they still will maintain their home edge. I like Vanderbilt. They're an improved team. Talking to Coach Lee, I think he's got a team that surprised me a little bit the second half last year when they upset both Florida and Kentucky in back-to-back weeks. I like Vanderbilt to win the game, but I'm definitely taking the big points with Hawaii here. I don't think there's that big of a talent difference. And if you go back to last year's game and watch it, Hawaii led 7-0. At one point, they had like an 80 to 30-yard edge. A couple of key defensive touchdowns. I believe there's 2 of them in the game. Got Vanderbilt rolling, and then they took advantage of the inexperienced Hawaii at that point. I think Hawaii keeps this one under the number. I like the dog here.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of talk about this game. I think it's going to be a really heavily betted game, too. A lot of people seem to be kind of bullish on Vandy. A lot of people think Hawaii's getting better. Like you said, new offense. And something just doesn't read right to me when I see Vandy minus almost 18 points. It's just too – I don't know if I can wrap my head around that quite yet. But I'm excited to watch that game and see what Hawaii can put together. I'm kind of leaning towards taking Hawaii with 17.5. It's just too many points for me to trust Vandy this early on, but we'll see. Moving on to the next game, San Jose State at number 6 USC. They're playing this one in Los Angeles. The Trojans are giving up 30.5. The total's at 66.5. We've got arguably the best player in the country, the returning Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Williams. They went 11-3 last year. San Jose State's never beat USC in 5 tries. I'm a little more interested in the over-under number here because I just wonder, like, is USC going to be good enough on defense? Are they going to give up enough for this to go over 66.5? Because you could really see USC just scoring 60 points.
Yeah, I was going to agree. I was going to ask you what the total was on the game because I would lean towards the over. Now, USC will have an improved defense this year. I mean, they added a defensive tackle from Georgia who's 315 pounds, was my number 6 rated defensive lineman out of high school. They had a defensive end from Texas A&M, my number 6 rated defensive lineman out of high school, 295 pounds. They had one of Oklahoma State's top tacklers from last year. Arizona, one of their top cornerbacks. It's the second year of the defense. I think they will be improved, but San Jose is pretty good on offense as well. And Chevin Cordero really had a great year last year, 23 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions. And when I was going over the offense with Coach Brennan, I've gone over it with him for all 7 years, 3 of the 4 positions. He said, this is the best unit I've had, quarterback, running back, offensive line, best unit I've had in my 7 years here. So I do think San Jose State is going to be able to put some points on the board. I think San Jose gets up 21, 24 points. So over is a really good play here. I do think the 2 teams go over. And one thing I want to mention to the viewers who may not have been following college football completely, there is a rules change this year where the clock is going to keep running on first downs. And that's not a major change. You're talking about 4 to 6 seconds per play on maybe 38 plays of the game. So it might shorten the game by 5 to 8 plays per game. We may see more unders early in the year, but this is a game where I do think we do see more points, and I like the over. I also like San Jose plus the 30.5. I've got this thing something like 49 to 23, something in that area. Both teams scoring points, but I'm going to take San Jose, an underrated Spartan team, plus the 30.5 in this one.
That's a lot of points. That is a lot of points. And I'd have to side with you there, too, solely based off of that rule change, which is something that I think many people have forgotten about, or at least don't follow the sport closely enough until week 0, until week 1, when people are going to start watching games and wondering why the clock continues to run. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's one thing of a number of things, conference realignment, but we're becoming too much like the NFL. That's my own kind of gripe and commentary. But this is, one of the things that made college football so uniquely different. And I do think, as difficult as it is, Phil, to win the Heisman Trophy in back-to-back years, it's only happened one time, right? Archie Griffin. I think the change with the clock rules even more takes any repeat chance out of Caleb Williams' hands in terms of being able to outproduce the way that he had a year ago, because there will be limited possessions. So, as sensational as he was and the numbers he was able to put up a year ago, having limited possessions based on the clock speeding up the game, I think is going to hurt him immensely. And we'll talk a little Heisman futures here shortly in a few moments. Caleb Williams at plus 550 is where you can find him, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. So San Jose State, USC, 8 o'clock on the Pac-12 network. Reminder, too, I said this off the start of the show, for those of you listening at College Sports Now, again, each and every week, wherever you get your podcasts, leave a review. It's your opportunity to get hooked up with a free Phil Steele Plus membership that's valued at $99. You'll have access to 133 now FBS teams. What? Jacksonville State, Sam Houston State. Who am I missing, Phil? Who is that? I feel like it was a 130 a year ago. Who else is?
Sam Houston State, Jacksonville State are the two. They have 131 last year, 133 this year. And you not only get access to all 133 FBS teams, I believe there's 123 FCS teams where you get complete history, updated stats every week, and all NFL teams, all 32 NFL teams are on there as well when you get Phil Steele Plus. And Kyle, we're giving away one per week, are we not?
Yeah, one per week is the goal, but we need you to go and leave us a review so you can make it hard on us, and we want you to go head-to-head with Phil. Just give your power plays, give some picks, ATS against the spread, and randomly we'll select somebody to give a free $99 value Phil Steele Plus membership to each and every week. As Phil said, all the teams, NFL, college football, FBS, FCS, you get those individual game grades, all the efficiency ratings, the power rankings, special teams rankings. It's all there for you. And two, don't forget about Inside the Press Box, which is a newsletter. You can find out more at philsteele.com. So again, leave us a review. One more FBS game to talk about, Phil, before I pull your chain a little bit on this FCS slate, because there are three games that I don't want to completely ignore. However, at this stage in the game, it's hard to find some intel and data out there. But FBS-wise, the seventh game of the night on week 0 on Saturday, just a couple of days away, is FIU at Louisiana Tech. The Bulldogs are favored by 11.5. 59 is the total. This will be a matchup of Hank Bachmeier, who's now the new guy under center for Louisiana Tech, former Boise State quarterback. Hank Bachmeier, who brings 29 starts of experience, 41 touchdowns, and 19 interceptions. He's got a new home going up against an FIU team who went 4-8 a year ago under Mike McIntyre. It's year 2 for him. Louisiana Tech was 3-9 only. Just missed your most improved list, I know, but what do you think about this matchup as the Bulldogs open up as a double-digit favorite here entering Saturday?
Yeah, and I like Louisiana Tech in this one for a couple of reasons. First of all, Hank Bachmeier didn't have a great start at Boise State last year, his first 4 games, and then left. But I like his career overall at Boise, and I think he is a very talented QB. So I think he's going to have success. I do think Louisiana Tech is a team that could easily make it to a bowl game this year, as they are vastly improved. Now, Mike McIntyre is tough to go against, and FIU will pull upsets. But here's the interesting thing. I looked when I was looking at this game as far as their road games go last year. They pulled 2 upsets. I mean, they beat New Mexico State on the road, a team that got to a bowl game. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, didn't you have them in that game?
Yes, I did.
They were coming off the 73-0 loss to Western Kentucky.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And the other game they won on the road was Charlotte, 34-15. Great. But when they don't win on the road, their losses last year were by 73, 38, 34. So they had all big losses on the road when they didn't win. And I think when you look at FIU, they did go through a rebuilding process. After I talked to Coach McIntyre this year, he lost one of his top linebackers. So they lost a couple of key players after I talked to him. And I think FIU will have a better year than last year. But I think this test here, I'm going to go with the home team. I believe last year Cumbie was 5-0 against the spread as a home team. So I got to go with the perfect home team against a team that if they don't win the game, they tend to get blown out. And that usually means, let's say you're down by 10 points and it's the fourth quarter and you're on your own 35-yard line. they're going to go for it on 4th and 7. And that sets up Louisiana Tech for another score because FIU's trying to win the football game. So that would be my handicapping aspect on this one. I like Tech minus the points.
Tech is also one.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to jump in. You do have to worry a little bit about Bachmeier's stamina now that I think he just turned 50 years old. He was the starting quarterback back when Boise State opened up in Tallahassee back in the Willie Taggart era.
He had a great game, too.
He did. He had a great second half. I remember it very well.
I picked Florida State in that game because it's a young quarterback making his first road start on the road. Heat, humidity of Florida. I love Florida State in that game, and Bachmeier really impressed me in the second half.
Yeah, that was a great comeback.
Bachmeier, that put him on the map, and it hasn't been all downhill since, but maybe a change of scenery will help him tap into some of that magic in Tallahassee from what seems like a decade ago.
One quick note while I'm thinking about it. Your comment about the first down rule.
Yeah.
As a guy who watches 12 games all day long on Saturday, I absolutely hate, one of my pet peeves is when game number 6 is running 3 hours and 45 minutes and I have to miss the start of another game because these damn games are going on so long. We don't need college football games to last 4 frickin' hours. So I'm all for any rule that shortens the games so I can have all my 12 o'clock games end by 3:30 and then watch all my 3:30 games in full. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Preach it.
I love it. That's great insight. As a guy who writes a magazine that is the holy grail, that is the college football Bible, and has to consume every single aspect, every second, every article written, everything about a specific team. And we know the rule change is geared towards TV, number one, to be able to fit more economically into a window, but an unintended consequence maybe by the TV networks and the conferences who are striking these deals, but very much appreciated by you, is how it affects the working life of one Phil Steele, to be able to condense things in, to keep the train moving. Because, you're taking in more football than 99.9% of people across this country, and you are that 0.1%. So, I hadn't thought about it in that way. So I'm glad you're happy, Phil. Phil, you're happy. I'm happy. You know what? I'm going to stop bickering and stop being salty on the clock change rule. So I got your back. Tripp, do you have, before we get to some future talk, Heisman, Natty, so some team totals, I'm just curious where Phil might lean on some of this, or I have a feeling you might go down to Athens for one of those in particular, the two-time defending national champions, and a decision they've made under center that was publicized here recently. But Tripp, how excited are you about the FCS games that we have this weekend? I know if you could find a line, because I can't find a line. I don't know if Phil has been able to find a line or what kind of feel he's got for the 3 other games. But look, we're getting 7 FBS games. Then there's 3 FCS games that are going to be on television as well in some form. Mercer against North Alabama at the Crampton Bowl, Fordham and Albany, South Carolina State and Jackson State in Atlanta, and a MEAC SWAC kickoff played at the home of Georgia State, formerly Turner Field, right there in the southeast side of the city. But Tripp, if you could find a line, you would have already put your money down on each of these 3 games, right?
Of course I would have. I'm thinking about opening up my own sports book. I mean, if there's a game, you need to be able to bet on it. That's just how I feel about it. So I don't know. I think Phil can maybe give us a little more information about this, but
let me talk to you about the FCS real quick. First of all, if you followed FCS, and by the way, this year we have an FCS magazine. I've done FCS magazines before. They've been 1 page per team. This year I have 2 full pages per team. I actually have the last 5 years spread records for every FCS team. I follow them all. I can tell you the lines for FCS versus FCS usually come up on Friday, and then they really hit. There's maybe 2 spots that have them on Friday. Saturday morning they start to put them up. And the reason for that is, let's face it, Vegas doesn't know as much about the FCS as, like, Alabama plays LSU. There is no value playing that game. The game is the number is super sharp. But these FCS games, you can find numbers that are 7 points off, and you just have to wait for them to hit and then play them. So the college football magazine, the FCS version, is available right now on philsteele.com. 2 full pages on every team, last 5 years spread records, everything you need to know about every team is in there. Also, my Inside the Press Box newsletter actually has forecasts for all 3 of the games: Mercer, North Alabama, Fordham, Albany, Jackson State against South Carolina State. They're all in the Inside the Press Box newsletter. And the FCS pages on Phil Steele Plus give you all the information you need to know. If it's week 6 and you want to know how the starting quarterback is done in each of the 5 games, it's up there. So same amount of coverage on the FCS we give you on the FBS, all that available at philsteele.com. Become an instant expert and get the value on the lines, because some of those FCS games are way off.
I'll give you some intel. These will be my power plays. This show isn't about me. It's not about Tripp. It's not about a teaser. It's not about my, favorite selections. It's about Phil and where he's leaning and how he can help you, bet smarter, not harder, and make some money and maybe put your kids through school. I've got an 8-year-old going on 18. I got an open house this afternoon where I got to go visit her 3rd grade classroom. So, I'm already sweating thinking about the future. If you're able to find a line between now and Saturday, don't worry about the line. Don't matter. I'm giving you straight up winners right here. Give me Mercer, who went 7-4 last year, taking on a 1-10 North Alabama team under a new head coach in Brent Dearman. Mercer has a wide receiver by the name of Ty James. 52 catches, 1,105 yards, and 13 TDs a year ago. He had 351 receiving yards alone in the season finale for Mercer a year ago. So that's a player you want to watch on Saturday. Ty James for Mercer. Fordham and Albany, I really don't care, but I'm gonna take Albany just because Tripp's boy, okay, Jared Verse, hails from Albany. I can't believe that guy started at Albany and now is at Florida State. So for that reason alone, give me Albany.
Buffalo. Was it Albany?
It was from Albany. It was
wow.
Albany. Okay, so there's your Florida State connection to take Albany over Fordham.
Jeez.
And then in the MEAC SWAC kickoff, the MEAC is 11-5 all time. This is South Carolina State hailing from the MEAC. Give me Jackson State under new head coach. Dion is gone. Bye-bye, Dion. Jacksonville State now going with T.C. Taylor. So give me Jacksonville State and T.C. Taylor to take down Oliver Buddy Poe, a 27th-year head coach at South Carolina State. So straight up, Mercer, Albany, Jackson State. That's all you need to know about the FCS for this weekend. How did I do, Phil?
I think you picked at least 2 of the teams that will be favored. Albany might be a slight dog because Fordham was really good last year, but Mercer and Jackson State will definitely be favored.
Yeah, Fordham 9-3, lost in the first round of the playoffs. Albany 3-8 a season ago. Okay,
where else are you going to get this? Like, where else on earth will you find this information?
Look, I had it on good authority that I had to bring my FCS game today. So that might be the extent of our FCS conversation now that Bobby Petrino is no longer at Missouri State. So that was one of our favorite wells to go to a season ago when Missouri State and Bobby Petrino were under the spotlight. Let's talk Heisman, Phil. Caleb Williams, plus 550, I'm seeing. Quinn Ewers, plus 800. Carson Beck, plus 900. Those are your top 3 guys, according to most sports books out there. Where do you see the most value if somebody was going to lay down a future on the 2023 Heisman Memorial Trophy winner?
Well, the value would be this. First of all, as far as Caleb Williams goes, if it's Caleb Williams or the field, I'm going to take the field. As you mentioned, there's only been 1 repeat Heisman winner, and I think you hit it right on the head. Caleb Williams not only competing against every other player in the country, but he's competing against himself last year. And last year he threw for 4,500 yards, had a 42-5 ratio, ran for 10 touchdowns. He's not going to have 52 touchdowns and 5 interceptions this year overall, and he's not going to match those stats. So people will say, well, what's wrong with Caleb Williams? That's part of the reason that the Heisman winners have not repeated. Now, for 2 value plays, and it's one that I liked at 20-1. You just mentioned the odds are 9-1. One of them is Carson Beck of Georgia, because when you look at Georgia, here's a guy that's been in the system for 4 years. He's got my number 1 rated offensive line in front of him. He's got outstanding receivers, running backs. The defense is even better than last year. They're going to be at least a 17-point favorite in 11 of their 12 games. By the time you get to the first real tough road test, it's at Tennessee. He's got 10 games under his belt. He's no longer a first-year starting quarterback. I think Carson Beck has an excellent shot at winning it. The odds used to be 20-1 when I was hyping it on my radio shows all summer, but I guess it's now down to 9-1. The other one I'm going to throw at you is Sam Hartman. Notre Dame is one of my surprise teams this year, as I mentioned. If they knock off Ohio State early, Ohio State's got a young quarterback, first real road start. They play USC at home, a head-to-head against Caleb Williams. The home team is 8-1 straight up in the Notre Dame USC game. It's October. It could be chilly in Notre Dame. I love their defense. I think Hartman taking over at offense after having a backup quarterback last year could have a big year, could have Notre Dame in the playoff, and I think that would make Sam Hartman a possibility for the Heisman. I believe the number that I've been quoting has been 20-1. Not sure what the odds are right now on him, but I like Hartman and Beck as my 2 long shot guys.
All right, I've got a few picks I want to run by you here, Phil, because there's one guy that I like kind of outside the top 5, but I think he could be the best player in college football, Marvin Harrison up at Ohio State. I mean, really, who cares who his quarterback is? I think either quarterback will be fine. I think they're going to put up a lot of numbers, and Ohio State's another one of those teams. They've got like a couple of games. If they can get through, they could be undefeated, but you could very easily see the Buckeyes going 10-2, 11-1, something like that. What do you think about Marvin Harrison? He's at plus 1,800.
Yeah, I think if you follow the trend of the Heisman voters, and of course I'm a Heisman voter, but if you follow the trend of how the Heisman voters have been doing, the last couple of years, it seems like they're trying to find a non-quarterback to put in there. I think Blake Corum would have had a chance of winning the Heisman last year and not got injured and had a big game against Ohio State. So I think the Heisman voters are looking for a non-quarterback to put in there, and that really is probably the best thing Harrison's got going for him. Plus, whatever quarterback wins the job, McCord or Brown, it'd be their first year as a starter. So I think Harrison's got a shot at those numbers.
I like him. I also think at plus 3,000, if you really want to get into some dark horse guys, the quarterback at Penn State, I think he's got a chance to be really good. Braylon Allen on Wisconsin is one of your most improved teams in the magazine. Look, Braylon, they might not go undefeated, but if the guy runs for 3,000 yards, I think he's going to get some attention. And then a really, really crazy dark horse here. If they can just find a way to navigate a really tough schedule and maybe only lose a game or two, KJ Jefferson, he's got so much talent. He's so fun to watch. If you want to talk about a really, really deep shot here, plus 8,000, KJ Jefferson.
Yeah, and you want to talk about a deep shot. A couple of years ago, on ESPN, I picked my long shot for the Heisman. Mm-hmm. And there was some guy that was about 200-1 odds. His name was Joe Burrow. And he ended up having a pretty good year and winning the Heisman. So I talked to his dad all the time because he used to be the defense coordinator at Ohio U. And I thank him. I let him know that, hey, tell your son thanks for make me look pretty good. Now, I don't know if KJ can get there because I'm not wild about Arkansas's chances. Yes, if they pull a lot of upsets. I'm a roulette player when I go to a casino. I like the heavy odds. So, I mean, it couldn't hurt putting a small wager down on them because you'd look like a genius at the end of the year. They are switching their offense. They're throwing the football more this year than they did last year. KJ has got a new receiving core to work with, but he likes his receiving core. Pittman likes his receiving core. So, I could see throwing a small thing on that. I definitely like Alar at Penn State. I think this is a team that can play with Ohio State and Michigan. If they win both those games, you're looking at a guy that would vault right up the charts. And Braylon Allen, the interesting thing when I talked to Coach when I talked to Coach Fickle about Allen is that he said they have been running into 8 and 9 man boxes the last couple of years, and he feels that going to the new offense, the air raid, they're going to open up the holes, and he's going to all of a sudden average a lot of yards per carry and more open space. So I can definitely see him making that major impact as well.
Shash, you got anybody you like here?
I love the Drew Aller at Penn State. I think the Big Ten is fascinating. I think the Big Ten could get 4 teams. I don't know with the bowl tie-ins. I tried to look at the other day. I think the Big Ten can get 4 teams in the New Year's Six. You're talking about 2 in the playoffs and then, a couple at-larges if possible. But I don't think it can happen because the Rose Bowl is one of the semifinal games this year. And I can't keep up with all the realignment at this time. But Maryland's my dark horse, who I believe can get to 8, 9 wins and possibly even 10. But Drew Aller at Penn State, he certainly is going to be the equalizer. They get their running backs back. Their defense is salty. I think they're going to cannibalize each other in a way. Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, where all 3 of them could be picks, for the playoff, given who wins the conference title game in Indianapolis, and then the loser of one of those head-to-heads is going to find their way in. So I think we're getting 2 Big Ten teams in the playoff this year, but Drew Aller is somebody I'm certainly high on. I'm trying to look for odds for, I just watched Johnny Football, the doc on Netflix, which you talk about a blasty blast. It was only 10, 11 years ago, but how he captivated an entire country in his freshman season. If I remember correctly, it was redshirt freshman year, though. But still, I'm thinking, who's a freshman that could burst onto the scene that maybe might have a little bit extra tentacles of a distraction or something attached to him? Not that it's his fault, but how about the guy who's just named the Arizona State starting quarterback because Drew Pine is hurt, the former Notre Dame transfer, Jaden Rashada, everything that dude was involved in, from committing to Florida initially to an NIL deal, not being there or being fraudulent, him pulling out, going to ASU. I mean, I think this guy's got a pretty high ceiling, so I'm excited to see what he can do. But, the question is, can that new coaching staff and, Dillingham, right, who came down and took over that job, he's a quarterback whisperer. I'm telling you, it could be, and that league, they're stacked with quarterbacks. It's a shame that we're talking so much conference realignment of the future of the sport when the Pac-12 is as competitively situated in the most positive light that we've seen in probably a decade, and are just stacked with quarterbacks, and we're being distracted in the most Pac-12 kind of way from the actual talent that is there to the future, or lack of future for the league. But I can't find odds on Rashada. I'd put maybe a 50 spot down on it, whatever it is.
50.
And, watch that grow, baby. So
rolling deep.
Yeah, why not?
The negative factor there, though, Kyle, is that last year, and I've heard some people talk about how competitive the Pac-12 is, top to bottom. I'm not buying that. I did a blog on philsteele.com that talks about how last year was the Big Six and the Little Six. Do you know the top 6 teams in the Pac-12 last year were 30-2 against the bottom 6 teams of the Pac-12? So Arizona State fits in that bottom half. I think it'd be tough for them to get a winning record this year, but I'd only maybe put $10 on that one, Kyle.
Hey, it's all charity here. It's all I don't expect it. Doesn't come back very often. That's where I recoup with the sickos. So I just swim in the cesspool.
Well, hey, while we're at it, I mean, that's kind of a segue into a team total for me with another freshman quarterback, possibly. I don't know if it's decided yet, but UCLA at 8.5. And it's really not just a quarterback, Dante
Moore.
Dante Moore. Yeah, it's not just the quarterback. Like, they're getting a lot of their guys back on defense this year. The schedule, kind of like last year, it might be a little tougher than last year, but I like the way it lines up. And at 8.5, I'm leaning a little Bruins over 8.5, I think.
Yeah, I would lean with the over. They're going to be an underdog in 3 games this year: at Utah, at Oregon State, and at USC. I mentioned Oregon State. You might not know they're 12-1 at home the last 2 years. One close loss to USC, and they've been playing in a rebuilding stadium. Now the stadium is fully capacity, and I think Oregon State's going to be extremely tough at home. So I've got them with 3 losses this year, 9-3. So I would lean with the over as well. And when I talked to Coach Kelly, he felt that it's probably the best team he's had since he's been there.
Over-under number I wanted to highlight, a couple of them. You talked about Wisconsin already, Luke Fickell, and your conversation with them. I'm worried about, though, the chemistry of the coaching staff and the personnel that they have. You get Tanner Mordecai, who, was just the quarterback of all quarterbacks at the group of 5 level over his tenure at SMU. Wisconsin's not known as kind of an aired out type team, and Luke Fickell really traditionally hasn't had those kind of teams, from Cincinnati to being part of the Ohio State staff. It's more of a ground and pound and really lean on your offensive lineman. And you get Phil Longo, the former OC at North Carolina, coming in. I know he's had some good back featured offenses at Carolina, but you think of the quarterbacks with Sam Howell and, of course, Drake Maye they have now. And I'm very curious how the scheme and all of that is going to blend and work together when you have 2 featured backs, or a back as good as you do in Braylon Allen, especially. So,
Kyle,
the over-under of 9, I would be taking the under on Wisconsin.
Okay, Kyle, I had the same concerns when I do the magazine in a 3 write-through process. The first write-through is a postseason write-through where I read through every article that's written about the team. Naturally, I've watched every game. I've lived the season, and that's when I do the first write-through. At that point, I was very concerned with Wisconsin because air raid, as you mentioned, they win their football games in November because they run the football, and I was very concerned. I actually had Iowa winning the Big Ten West at that point. But in the third write-through of the magazine, after I talked to Coach Fickell, going over the squad with him, he assured me they are not abandoning the run game, which was my main concern. He said, as I mentioned, that he feels that teams have been able to stack 8-9 guys in the box by spreading them out. they're going to create more holes for Allen and Maluzzi, and he feels they're actually going to have a more successful run game. In fact, if you go back and look at Wisconsin, the last 3 years, they haven't even averaged over 5 yards per carry, which is surprising for Wisconsin. They're a team that usually averages over 5, close to 6 yards per carry. Last year, they were number 123 on my experience chart. This year, they're all the way up to number 18. They go from 3 returning starters on defense to 8 returning starters on defense. So they made a big jump experience-wise. I did a blog on philsteele.com, and check out these blogs. I do a lot of research on them. But if you take a look at the teams that have made a jump of 60, 70, 80 places on my experience chart, they usually have a massive increase in their record. So a much more experienced team this year. Then look at their road games. Washington State, winnable. Purdue, winnable. Illinois, winnable. Indiana, winnable. Minnesota, winnable. Wisconsin usually travels pretty well there. The 2 toughest games on the schedule are Iowa, they get them at home. Ohio State, they not only get them at home, but they get them at home the week after they play Penn State, which is a massive game in the Big Ten East. Add it all up, they've been my number 1 surprise team. I've got them going 11, potentially 12 wins this year. I am bullish on the over.
Okay, you've talked me off the ledge on Wisconsin. My Mississippi State from last year, then, when I took the over, I think they're at 4.5, and they shatter that. I'm going to go with Pitt this year. That's my over-under darling, and I'm going over the 6.5. Phil Jurkovec under center. The Keaton Slovis experiment didn't work last year. I think Pitt's going to get back to business. They've got some swing games early on against North Carolina at home, at Wake Forest, at home to Louisville right before that in the middle of October. Of course, at Notre Dame, Florida State. It gets menacing in the middle part to the back end of the schedule, and you finish at Duke. But I think there's 7 winnable games for Pitt, and they could even flirt, with 8 or 9 if things really roll right for Pat Narduzzi and the boys. So I'm gonna ride with over 6.5 for Pitt this year.
I love that play, Kyle. That is a tremendous pick, and it should go over easy this year. When you look at Pitt and you look at Coach Narduzzi, every year they lose some top-notch defensive linemen, and you're like, oh boy, how can they match what they did last year? But if you look at the last 4 years of sacks that defense has produced, it doesn't matter who they lost. They've got 51, they've got 46, they've got 54, they've got 48 sacks. Am I concerned that their defense is not going to be good? No. Am I concerned they're not going to get pressure on the quarterback? No. Offensively, I really like the pickup of Jurkovec. He's back with his offensive coordinator, Signetti, which he had at Boston College 2 years ago. They've got the run game. In fact, they lose Abanconda at the running back spot, but Coach Narduzzi told me he feels that all 3 of their top running backs are capable of getting to 1,000 yards this year. Not actually all in the same year, but any of the 3 can emerge and be that 1,000-yard back. The offensive line suffered through a lot of injuries last year. They're all back together. And you look at their schedule, I can easily see this team. They get North Carolina at home. They get Louisville at home. Wake Forest, I think, is beatable. I could see them 7-0 and over your 6.5 total by the time they play Notre Dame. They get Florida State at home in the cold. Then Syracuse, Boston College, Duke. There's a lot of winnable games on that schedule. Double-digit wins surprised me with this one. So I love that play, Kyle.
No respect. 9-4 a year ago. Like 6.5 this year? Come on. Oh. Yeah. In the bag.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I give them respect because I had to double check you. I thought maybe you had gotten the wrong number somewhere. I was really surprised. 6.5 is the number, though.
Where are you playing that, Kyle? I got to get online as soon as we get off this show here.
I believe that was hang on. I think that's from DraftKings. Yeah, DraftKings.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great bet. I'm 100. Of course, it scares me a little bit, like maybe somebody knows something we don't. But
don't worry about
that's okay.
Play it. That total is going to be 7.5, 8 in a couple of days.
All right. Well, here's my last team total, and this will transition straight into the national championship odds. I think I've figured out who's going to win the whole thing this year, and I think it might surprise you, but it might not. So I don't know how many teams in your preseason magazine that don't crack the top 10 in quarterback units, linebacker units, offensive line unit, or defensive line unit that you would seriously consider to win a national championship. But Alabama's, they fit all of that this year. You don't have their units rated that high, but their team totals at 10.5. I think they've got the second best odds to win the national championship, which tells me that probably in 5 or 6 weeks from now, a lot of these guys that we don't know right now are going to be bona fide first round draft picks in the next NFL draft. That's kind of what that says to me. And I think one thing I did pick up from your magazine, Phil, you really like Bama when they're not the preseason number 1. They're kind of a dangerous team. I mean, obviously Bama's always dangerous, but what do you think about the Tide this year?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Tripp. When you look at this team on paper, 5 returning starters on offense, 5 on defense. They lose arguably the best quarterback in college football. They lose their best defensive player. Nobody's high on Alabama this year, but they've only won one national title when preseason number one. The last time they weren't ranked preseason number one, 2020. What happened? National title. Last time they were ranked preseason number 4, undefeated national title. So this is when Nick Saban is most dangerous. And I had many power ratings that were looking at Alabama and saying, how do you do this? I put Alabama in the playoff just based on the fact that Nick Saban, not preseason number one, gets it done. And they get LSU at home. They get Tennessee at home. If you follow Alabama the last couple of years, they haven't struggled at home. They've struggled on the road. Last year, they barely got past Texas. They lost to Tennessee. They lost to LSU. They struggled against Ole Miss. The previous year, they struggled in their road games. However, they don't struggle at home. The only game that I've got question mark on their schedule this year is at Texas A&M. They lost at College Station the last time they played them last year. A&M's at the 2-yard line at home. The only game they struggled in at home with a chance to win it on the final play of the game. So I've seen them 11-1, perhaps 12-0 this year, and I would give Alabama a shot. I did go with Georgia. I went with the chalk. I think Georgia's the more complete team this year, but I'm not the one that's going to bet against Nick Saban getting it done.
Just who is going to be their quarterback? They're going to implement a multi-quarterback system, most likely, trying to ensure maybe like Milroe doesn't transfer. Maybe you go with the Notre Dame guy and Buckner. I don't know. It could be a mess. It could be Nick Saban can look like the genius he's always looked like, very much so, or, the blame is going to be, bestowed upon the quarterback position. And maybe as he lost it, as he lost his ability to recruit and stack his team, I think it's not that. It's, I think most likely Bama is going to be flirting with a college football playoff position in ways that certainly the doubters, the hate, the rat poison, if you will, is going to be used positively from an Alabama perspective. So I like the over 10.5 for Bama getting back to the playoff. So that's all we got time for on the Phil Steele Show, the Week 0 edition, Season 2. Those national championship odds, Tripp, you're right. I'm seeing Bama as the second best odds, plus 550, plus 250 for Georgia, leader in the clubhouse. Nobody's repeated, Phil, what, since Minnesota in the 40s, 3 consecutive
30s.
times?
1930s.
30s. Okay. So Georgia is trying to match what Minnesota last did in the 1930s and winning a 3rd straight national championship. Ohio State at plus 800, the 3rd best betting odds. So that's Week 0. Phil will be back next week and Thursdays. Get it to your podcast feed. Follow us at College Sports Now, wherever you get your podcasts. Phil's on weekly Wednesdays with Wayne Cook and Stephen Hartzell. Go back one more episode in your feed if you want more Phil. Other ways he may have looked at these games. Of course, it's Tripp and I. It's our duty to try and creatively and in a more entertaining way bring you Phil each and every week following the Wayne Hartzell and Phil Steele appearance on Wednesday. So there will be some differences. There will be more opportunities for you to get a Phil Steele Plus membership valued at $99 for free. Go head-to-head with Phil. Get in the Apple Podcast review feed. Leave us a review and drop some of your power plays, ATS against the spread for Week 0. Any one of those 7 FBS games that we've ran down with you here today. Again, the first of 13, 14 shows as we embark on the 2023 college football season. Head to philsteele.com for more. Phil, if I missed anything, I hope you had a good time. It's great being back with you.
Yeah, it was great talking to you guys again. Great seeing you once again as well. So I had a lot of fun and look forward to next week, our first full week of college football.
Yeah, we'll be back next week, Thursday. The Phil Steele Show, helping you to bet smarter, not harder, right here on College Sports Now.